Crabtree is going to walk us through a presentation. Primarily, we want to talk about the density of housing in this area. As we've discussed before, generally we've talked about 4,500 units plus minus, but depending on how much open space we have and if we discard the road network, and the density could go up or down. So Andrew will talk about that. We want to engage the council in some decisions or some guidance today on those kind of topics, the density, the road network, because this is planning the whole network for that north part. And of course, City Place will be happening in that vicinity, so how everything works together. In addition, as I mentioned, the location of the open space, whether it's in the middle of this site or is it onto one side, et cetera. So those are the kinds of things Andrew will walk us through, and we will really appreciate engagement with the council on discussion items and getting the guidance. Some of the developers, property owners are here, or some representatives of property owners are here too. And we can take their input as well. So with that, Mayor, with your indulgence, if I could ask Andrew to present.
Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you, Mayor, members of City Council. As mentioned, I'm Andrew Crabtree, Director of Community Development. And the Tasman East Focus Area Specific Planning process was last in front of you in August of last year. So it's been about 10 months. And we're here to give you an update on where we are and we're looking for council concurrence on some key issues related to the roadway network that will allow us to move forward. So with that, I'll sort of walk through. Just as an overview, for those who maybe aren't familiar, the Tasman East Focus Area is on the north side of Tasman, west of the Coyote Creek, east of Lafayette Street, near Great America Station. That's the planning area outlined there in blue. It's identified in our general plan as a focus area with the intent of developing 4,500 dwelling units of residential development. I'm sorry, Guadalupe, did I say Coyote? Guadalupe River, excuse me. And when we were in front of you last, we shared this slide that the vision is for a vibrant, high-density neighborhood, very walkable with amenities sort of common to a more urbanized area. Sort of as we're looking forward how to create a more urban but an attractive district in Santa Clara that serves our community's needs. We talked a lot about the density and what the council's and the city's objectives for number of units means in terms of density, that if you take the 4,500 dwelling units and once you net out streets and open space and so forth, really looking at planning at higher densities, and council weighed in and affirmed that approach. So that we're looking at a mix of building types, but we would definitely expect to see, a lot of development in the 4 to 6 story range of a typical sort of type 5 or type 3 podium, and then also some towers that would be taller as well. These are some examples of what these different projects could look like. And as we normally use dwelling units per acre as our measure of density, what that means is that a project with small units could be much smaller than a project with big units. If different types of apartments have different scales of unit size, or different amenities, different other things that can add to the building bulk and mass. So you see here in the sort of the 70 to 80 dwelling unit acre range, and where we are is that the plan is that 70 would be the minimum density that could be developed on smaller lots of less than 1 acre. You can see, that could be in some cases 3 or 4 stories, or it could be, up in 5, 6 stories as well at that density. Looking at examples in the 100 to 110 dwelling unit range, and you see one here that's in Santa Clara on the top there that's actually only 2 to 3 stories. So those are very small units in that project that reach that density. And then other projects, again, 4 to 6 stories are fairly typical for this density range. The intent is that 100 dwelling units per acre would be the minimum density for lots over 1 acre, so in the plan area. So you would see a fair amount of this type of development. And then just some examples of, as you move up into the higher density ranges, you can achieve those densities still with the type 3 or type 5, but you're also, more commonly, you might see some higher density towers as well. And then if you get anything much over 200 units to the acre, you're definitely looking at type 1 tower construction. I think that's part of the vision for this plan area. The intent is not necessarily to have a maximum on the density that would be limiting. So, you could see the plan would support high-rise residential development as well. So the next thing that we talked about, we're going to talk about a little bit, is the open space plan. And there were different concepts that had been kind of floated out at the last work study session, and as well as with the community, and sort of how to do it. And the sort of conclusion was to go forward with this we call urban dispersed sort of approach. So you'll see where we are now with the planning is that there's sort of a number of smaller parks that cumulatively would give us at least 5 acres of parkland. There's a goal of having each block have a park within that block so that your residents wouldn't have to cross the street to get to some kind of open space area. The largest of it is to the east, up against the Guadalupe River, of those open spaces. And we'll talk next about the street network. We sort of looked at how this area fits in the context of being next to City Place, the retail part, the City Place office campus. That's all planned, but there's already sort of a roadwork design in place. There's the existing residential neighborhood to the south. There's development nearby in San Jose that's also part of the traffic movement through the area, sort of acknowledging that. And then there's the light rail and the heavy rail stations that are an important part of the context. So also talked about how walkability was an important goal for this plan area. This is from the prior study session, and that was one of the things that fits with that urban approach to development. And so what's new here is that we have worked planning, public works staff with our consultants and with to a degree with some of the potential developers to explore what road network could look like in this area. And we're trying to balance 2 important goals. One is our placemaking goal. We want streets that really support the kind of urban environment that we want to foster in this area. And we also want to recognize the need for cars to move through the area as well. One thing about this plan area is that it's kind of a way to move from Lafayette to Tasman, those 2 streets, since there's a grade separation, the sort of the connection between them goes through our planning area. So we really looked at that and came up with an approach that we think balances these 2 goals. And I'll talk about that. So first, looking at Lick Mill Boulevard, we really see Lick Mill Boulevard as a very important north-south connector, a way for cars to move through the area. That's planned to be 4 travel lanes, 2 in either direction, and then with a separate bicycle lane to support it, so that would help to carry a lot of vehicle and bicycle traffic through the area. Moving on to Calle de Mundo, we're proposing that Calle de Mundo be a very important east-west connector. And again, with 2 travel lanes and a center turn lane and separate bicycle lanes. And so these 2 streets would work to carry the more of the vehicle traffic through the plan area, providing the connections between Tasman and Lafayette that sort of is the preferred way for people who want to drive through the plan area to move along. But they're not only capacity, there's also capacity in these other streets. So Calle de Luna would also provide east-west connection, but it's designed to be more of a pedestrian-oriented type street with on-street parking that would support the residential uses that kind of front onto that street. To keep the street right-of-way a little bit narrower, it would have shared car and bicycle lanes. So the goal is that this is more of an urban-style street that's conducive to having development that fronts onto it and have a sort of a positive pedestrian experience to be walking on that street. And then looking at Calle del Sol, Calle del Sol is really emerged as the key for where the commercial mixed-use retail-type development would occur in the plan area. So the street design is very important to create that sort of sense of place where people who live in this area will go. That's where their coffee shops and their restaurants and that sort of thing would be located. And so it's a fairly again, narrow right-of-way. It does have 2 travel lanes, shared bicycle lanes, and on-street parking, which is important to support the kind of retail that you want to line the street. Now, in again trying to balance the overall needs to move cars through the area, the proposal is that we would look at having that extend. Currently, it does not extend north of like that, so we would extend it north, potentially all the way up to the related development adjacent. There's a possibility that as it moves to the northern part, it would transition to just a bicycle pedestrian for that last little segment to the north. But the intent is that it do extend. And then there's a traffic circle or roundabout that would be, it's proposed as sort of the way to help move cars around between Calle de Luna and Calle de Sol. Also, there would be in the plan additional bicycle and pedestrian connection north-south to the west of Calle de Sol. So this is sort of the concept, and what we're looking for is really council concurrence with this approach as we go forward so that we can take this and go off and analyze it through the environmental impact review process. We'll use this proposed roadway network as the basis of the traffic analysis that we'll do. And then that will help us to really understand what impacts it would have in terms of traffic as this development occurs. The context, without stating the obvious, but as we look into the future, there will be more traffic, there will be more development, particularly here. As we add development, that will bring traffic with it. So we are anticipating more traffic. In taking this balanced approach between moving cars and placemaking goals, we're not looking at having the intersections be as wide as they might be otherwise. And we don't know the outcome yet, but we anticipate that with this street network, we may not be able to achieve the level of service D standard at some of these intersections in the future. And in our general plan, it says that we can make that decision for our specific plan areas to move away from the level of service D standard as a minimum requirement for traffic flow. So we just want to acknowledge that we expect there will be some increased congestion as we deal with narrower streets, and that maybe a bit of an impediment for people who want to drive through the plan area in the future in the context of all these other things. So that's the summary of the roadway network. And there was also a question about who out there is working on the development, and I believe that these folks are probably well represented here today as well. But we do have a number of developers who are looking at, who have contacted us and indicated that they're working on they're looking at projects. We don't have applications processing, but they're interested, and they're very interested in this planning process. So with that, next steps following tonight, we'll go off and have our consultants prepare the EIR, which we expect to be 9-10 month process, and to be back in front of the City Council in spring of 2018, and available for any questions that the council might have.
Vice Mayor Caserta?
Thank you, Andrew, for your presentation. I just want to be crystal clear. I see a lot of diversity of housing here, from small micro units to very tall. I see this as very pedestrian and bike-friendly that will support the shared experience at the related site that hopefully will get done sooner than later. And I really like your highlighting of placemaking there. But I really want to see this an eclectic, diverse opportunity of housing. And also, I know you are doing yeoman's effort and your staff is so really busy. Just want to highlight again the certainty and predictability of these developers and communication with you moving forward. But I thought that was really nice presentation, and I just think this is an opportunity to really, really create those shared experiences outside of vehicles in support and synergy of what we have at that city on the hill that I call it. So, thank you.
Councilmember O'Neill?
Thank you. Yeah, very interesting presentation, Andrew. So I very much appreciate it. So one of the thoughts that comes into my mind is I'm trying to remember from all the presentations we had about the City Place project and the road network there. For the streets, like Calle de Mundo and Calle de Luna, is there how they're going to connect to Lafayette? Is that do you envision that changing? Because we have kind of like a lot of kind of loop around and turn, are we going to kind of re-engineer more of that? And I think isn't the plan for Lick Mill to extend up into City Place, and then we could have like a river walk or something like that?
Yeah. So the plan is for Lick Mill to extend all the way up and connect, I guess, eventually to Great America Parkway across the top there. And that this is consistent with that. What might be a little bit different is that we find we need to move forward sooner with the Lick Mill extension, as now we're putting greater emphasis on it and Calle de Mundo as the way to connect between Lafayette and Tasman. So that's something we'll be testing as we do the EIR and the traffic analysis, is to look at like what point do we think we need that connection to be in place. But there were assumptions made about the road network in the City Place EIR. This is a little bit different than what was assumed, but that process allows for that as we go forward and we do our own analysis here.
So my next question, thank you for that, is like looking at the slide, I guess, where we show the potential developers. And so I'm assuming so those are the parcels that have been acquired thus far by those developers?
Well, we have developers who are working on those, and whether they own them or they're an option, there's kind of a variety of, or somewhere in between, there's kind of a variety of steps in the process. But those are people who have contacted us and are participating with us in the planning process.
Because I know some of the business owners have, been pretty, they've been vocal. I mean, I understand totally, they're very vocal at this point about wanting to maintain their business location. So we would think that the project would still be viable, say that middle section there, if it stayed in an industrial environment for 20 years or something. Does that what kind of potential impact does that have on how viable the plan is?
Yeah. So it's definitely our intent to allow those uses to continue on, right? As we've discussed in the past, and so we recognize that if there is no development, we're not going to build the streets in the middle there. And again, we'll have to look at the implications of sort of a phased approach in our traffic analysis, and just understand that if the front portions were to develop and the back portions, so to speak, were to develop and the middle not, what would that look like without the Calle de Sol extension? And we may need to look at some interim conditions on the other streets where we want to do on-street parking, but do we need to stripe it differently in the near term until we can have that full network of streets in place?
So, thank you. So also looking at it, like one of the considerations, one of the things that I still think would be really nice is if we did have some kind of trail lighter, more than just like the levee for, along the river. And I think, I'm guessing that I went to one of the community meetings, but obviously this has progressed further than from when I was there, that by having the dispersed park approach as opposed to then having, telling one developer, like, oops, sorry, you're going to have the 5-acre park in your parcel, I mean, so was that part of the thinking to disperse it so that all of the burden, since there's quite a number of developers and the city doesn't own any property out there currently? Is that kind of what the thinking is?
It was definitely an important consideration because it is more feasible to achieve the open space when it's dispersed like this. And that was
So,
important
I mean,
part of it.
but it's somewhere, we probably still need to have, and I'm not sure, like, when some of the residential that's right across the river, I believe that's still in the Santa Clara Unified School District, and we're going to have to look at somewhere, either across the river or here or someplace else, potentially having to, have another school. And I think, kind of some of the descriptors that Vice Mayor Caserta was using in terms of looking at the options of having a more urban-type school, an elementary school that would be multi-stories, or maybe is combined, a shared facility combined with a city that maybe has like a small community center or a small branch library or something like that. Maybe something very different, maybe something that has retail on the first floor and it has so, I mean, we'll have to keep that in mind with the school district. Like I said, I'm not sure what they're seeing from what's coming in terms of student load from all the North San Jose development, but so that's some of my thoughts that we could, like I said, in keeping with the vice mayor's description, come up with something really kind of creative. Perhaps we could partner with San Jose on something. So that's.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to add onto that, this is going to be a highly densely populated area. So I see the open space and the opportunities for placemaking and other things. We'll also have to keep in mind anything else. Do we need a small fire station? Do we need, a police substation? Because with that amount of people, and I know that we're going to have these types of uses on City Place, but because of the highly dense potential population there, we have to look at maybe a bookmobile, or, I'm kidding there, an actual, library annex, or, something like that. So we have to keep in mind for the whole property, understanding it may not all be developed, that it's highly likely there may be parcels that stay as they are right now, and that's fine. We promised those residents we would never condemn their properties for this type of use, but hopefully we just have to have the vision into the future as to what that's a little community in itself, what it's going to look like, and make sure that it has the right services for that. Councilmember Watanabe?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Andrew. Great presentation. Glad to see, the plans or suggestions for the streets. I had a note from one of the neighbors up in the north side area, and she just sent in some questions and some thoughts and concerns. So I'll just go ahead and share some of them with you, and there are some questions as well. She loves the placemaking concept and the vision of Calle de Luna as a main placemaking street, which she envisions as possibly being the Franklin Street prior to urban renewal, and now the core of the downtown Santa Clara revitalization effort. And the thinking is that this could be a new urban neighborhood with the traditional suburban neighborhood, and used as a model moving forward, and if planned and built outright. One of her concerns regards the Tasman East requirement of the general plan requirement for 10 acres. She said that the general plan requirement would be 10 acres. And she said the memorandum lists 5 acres, which I believe you've identified here. Is that the case? Should there be 10 acres, or is 5 acres?
Lee?
Bunch of population. Yeah, so okay. So, the references to the parks acre per capita standard in the general plan. And so, you know, we're aware, definitely aware, as you go with these more urban type developments, and you look at like a, you know, the per capita, the population goes up per acre. And so it would actually be, if you wanted to really hit the full standard in the general plan, you would probably be looking at more than 10 acres of parkland, 22 acres. So a significant portion of the site would have to be given over if it was all supplied on site. So there's different ways of looking at it, and one is, you know, is that the right standard for a more urban area? As you go taller, you look in proximity and you know, access to open space versus necessarily a, you know, if you were spread out over at a lower density, that standard might get you, you know, a park that was further away. Here you have it closer. So there's sort of access to that. There is access to the Guadalupe Creek Trail and some other open space in the area, regional areas. We have our new 35-acre park being planned just a little bit further north of here. So there's other amenities in the area. And you know, if you sort of look at these kind of denser developments, this is more in keeping with how urban neighborhoods are built. You know, to achieve that standard, you'd probably have to, it'd be about half of the total acreage would be parkland, and it would be very hard to actually implement that, right? So to be feasible, again, and achieve our goals for providing the housing development that we want to see here and other development that we want to see, but also make sure it's a good neighborhood. We're trying to balance all that. And we think this is a good approach that addresses that.
Okay, maybe there might be a way to incorporate as another amenity, some kind of a community garden or multicultural center to integrate it into the property, and if we can't dedicate the space. The other thing, you know, there's a concern about, you know, the density, you know, 4,500 dwelling units. And if there is a way that, you know, using the general plan guideline, compromise to maybe 75 dwelling units per acre, but that's just a suggestion. And let me see, of course, there's concern with Levi Stadium and event days and, you know, what impact that'll have on these streets. And, you know, going forward, of course, I mean, that's definitely something to be considered. Another question, the minimum building height is 5 stories. What is the maximum building height?
Right. Well, we haven't defined a specific maximum height as of yet. We could look at like FAA standards for that, you know, that could come into play as we're getting close proximity to the airport, relative proximity to the airport. But for these, you know, taller buildings, you're definitely, you know, anticipating if could be, you know, 180, 200 feet in some cases, 250 maybe at the extreme.
Stadium is 175 feet tall, so at least it could be that height.
Okay.
And just also want to mention too that part of the discussion so far has been that, you know, this housing would be a mix of types, both physically, but also in terms of, you know, senior housing, affordable units are also going to be incorporated into this development.
Okay, good. And then just one last comment about the 90 students. It's not going to happen. There will be more. There will be more, and there will be a need for another school, excuse me, in the north side. It's always underplanned. Don Calajan is a perfect example, and everything that's going on out there right now. The school is busting at the seams, and they're overloading kids. So there will definitely be more than 90 kids. So, yeah. Thank you very much, Andrew. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Mahan?
Thank you. I did have some questions as well. First, on the building heights, I know you had said a minimum, but is that overall? Because I could envision some of the developments wanting to have possibly even lower building heights in the middle or in the edges where they might put amenities to serve, you know, to serve their population. You know, they tend to put swimming pools and even open space and walking tracks and all that stuff. but they're not going to put them on the 5th floor. So, I mean, is that just a minimum, or is that just an overall that you're looking at? And can the individual developers vary according to their plans?
Well, there's definitely going to be variation. That we talked really about the minimum density in terms of dwelling unit per acre. So I think that there's flexibility normally in how we implement that, there can be parts of the development that are lower, absolutely.
Shouldn't we make that clear that we're really more talking about maximum building heights and set that? Because then you give the developers a lot of, a creativity, room for creating their own space in their own environment. The other about the school, I absolutely agree with Councilmember Watanabe. We say time and time again, the idea that this is going to be, quote, worker housing, they're not going to have children, it's sort of a myth, and it never pans out, and we really do have to plan for the students that are going to be coming to live, because there are no other places for families to live, and this will be housing for families, no matter what we try to say otherwise. So we really do need to plan for another school out there at some point, especially with this impact. The other thing is, I strongly agree, again, with Councilmember Watanabe's point that she brought up, is that we really need to put the maximum open space in this. Again, because we have now a park fee, we now have this affordable housing fee, we have a dedication requirement, but a park fee in lieu of, but there's no place for us really to go buy more parklands. But at least if we plan for the maximum on site, we have a possibility, because it's possible that a developer will make a dedication instead of paying the in lieu fees, and that we'll be able to achieve the right amount of open space in this area, rather than try to just get fees and then try to find a space out, off-site to accommodate more open space. And so I really think we need to put what the general plan requirement would be, at least in our planning stage. I mean, we can always step back from that, but if our signal is we're only ever going to require 5 acres when we should be requiring 10 acres, we'll never be able to step up to 10, but at least if we start at 10, we can step back from it, and as we work with the development community to come up with a plan. My other question is, are we going to do an overall master plan, overall, so that we have all of the master plan, I'm sorry, not a master plan, a master environmental impact report, an EIR, so that we have all the components in place? So like the last developer in doesn't get stuck doing all the traffic mitigation that was caused by previous development. So we can anticipate what, if developed entirely, what those traffic mitigations would be, what the open space requirements would be, what the, all of this stuff. And then the individual developers can just plug in and pay their share.
Yeah, yes, so that's very much the intent, as we just did with the Lawrence Station area plan, that there would be a master program EIR for the whole development, to the degree that we have foreseeable projects. We can look at how those tier off of that. And then there's also been discussion about various ways to spread the cost of not just the planning, but the improvements, over the properties in an equitable way.
Thank you.
Councilmember Davis?
Thank you, Andrew, for giving me this. I was the request. So my question is, where some of these parcels are, and I know we're not going to ask if they were purchased or not purchased or in process purchase. This centerpiece here, with this light industrial area, do we have any issues there? Because somebody had told me that there might be some toxicity in the soil from manufacturers previously being there. And part of that is, are these people willing to give up their land for a development?
So I think to start with the second part of that first, as mentioned earlier too, all along it's been, well, at least as we've been going through this process, we've been very clear that no one's going to force anyone to develop their property here, right? That those parcels in the middle, the plan is going to be structured in a way that those industrial uses are free to continue to be there, and we'll deal with the issues of whether it be noise or whatever of interface. We'll have to deal with that as we go forward. One thing that's helpful, I suppose, about higher density development is it's often easier to deal with those issues. As you talk about like soil contamination and the need to remediate or encapsulate, as you have a type of project with a podium and that sort of things, it's often easier. But that'll be looked at through the EIR process, and as projects come in, they'll have to deal with whatever on-site remediation they would have. But in terms of needs, or whether that's hauling off that soil and treating it as hazardous materials or whatnot, that would be addressed that way.
Okay, and to go on to that, are there any manufacturers out there that have an air quality radius, the circles? Does anybody fall with any of that?
Yeah, we haven't really looked at that yet,
Okay.
but again, there's generally ways to address these issues if they come up.
Okay, so you answered those two, and then the traffic is also part of this EIR that you were looking at?
Yes, absolutely.
Calming features or walkability, or you're going to look at all that. And the placemaking, you did kind of bring that up, where we could work on that a little bit, be part of this study. Timing, what is your thoughts on timing? Are you looking for direction out of us to either say yes or no, or accelerate, or what is your theory on that?
So our request today is that if the council says we're on the right track, then we'll go prepare the EIR accordingly, or with, and also reflecting the input that we've heard. And that, we've sort of been waiting to have this check-in so that we can really fully start the EIR process. And we anticipate, going full speed, but that will take us through into early 2018, and that we'll be back. Ultimately, the plan would get to the council sometime in spring of 2018.
And we're going to look at, I kind of like the breakup that you did, but then again, we're not there with everybody some people on board, some people not on board. And I also agree with the open space. I mean, if it was up to me and that was some of our land there, I would definitely kind of protect that Guadalupe there and use that for Creek Trail, because I don't see any more open space coming unless we ask for it. Unless we say we really need to have this space, because that's a long distance for that 35-acre park that should be on. That's a hike if somebody wants to walk that. But then if there's somebody that is in families, which you're going to have families, are they going to walk that distance to a toy, place, a little tot lot or something like that? So I think that we definitely have to look at getting at least the maximum of open space in this area, no matter how we can figure it in or configure it. So those are just my questions on this. But if you're doing a full EIR on that whole area, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Councilmember O'Neill?
I just wanted to make the point, and I mean, I'm a huge fan of open space. If we're going to look at trying to increase that, I think you've got to acknowledge that most likely, because we have, we have some goals that we've been talking about in terms of adding housing units, particularly to service the amount of commercial space that we're going to be adding, particularly with the related project in this general vicinity. And so if we're going to have a little more open space, then we're probably going to have to agree to go a little higher on the density. And in some of these areas, I don't know, and I'm assuming that the representatives from the developers would like to speak. So I know we've got 6 that are listed here, and I don't know what all of their plans, but it might be that we're going to, would need to let a couple of those go, to higher, taller buildings, which might be, if it's placed appropriately. I know that there's some like single-family homes right on the other side of Tasman there. But I mean, I think that you could look at placing appropriately, and I think that that's the trade-off. If you're going to have more open space, you may have to look at, if we're talking about creating an urban environment, that something's going to have to be taller than 4 stories.
Okay, I don't see any other questions, but I do have a few cards, so are you finished, Andrew?
Yes,
Does
sir.
it go back to city manager? Did you want to say something before we go to the public? Okay, good. Tyson Sales, and then Steve Edwards. Would like to come forward, please? Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, council members. Thank you, staff. We are here to speak on behalf of Ensemble, one of the developers, and we support an urban village roadway plan, and we urge the council to move the process along and to direct staff to move the EIR forward as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve Edwards and then Susan Smart after that. Welcome.
Thank you. Steve Edwards, also with Ensemble Investments and Rethink Development. And I would like to echo the need for an urban village in a high-density area here. We need to get housing units. I was most recently on the city's affordable housing working group. We went through 4 meetings to try to come up with our affordable housing strategy. And I was proud that a diverse group came together to figure out some compromise. One thing, we disagreed on a lot of things. One thing we agreed on intently was there is desperate need for more housing in this general area, and whatever we can do to get it, we need to do. And whether that's having roadways, as the staff has designed, a little bit smaller to create a pedestrian network is the way to go. And then being smart with where we put the parks that are programmed to have actual activities like a restaurant next to a tot lot or for kids to go run around is a great way for parks to be integrated in an urban environment. So I would look towards staff's recommendation and Perkins and Will recommendation on those distributed parks. And lastly, we've been working on this for a while. The staff's been working on it. You guys have heard it a lot. We'd really like to move this along for everybody, and the need for housing is great, and so as soon as we get those units delivered to the marketplace, the better. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan Smart and then Kurt Vartan. Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I'm Susan Smart. I'm the project executive at Related. We are currently owners of 14 acres out here. The 2 parcels that you have shown on your map that we are identified with, we have owned for a couple years now. I want to make a couple comments. We are very appreciative of the efforts of the city staff to try to find a balance between placemaking and traffic, and we think that some good solutions are being proposed. We would, however, like to specifically comment on the notation in the staff report that Lick Mill would have to go ahead of any other development out here, and that has us a bit concerned because first of all, it puts all the other developers at the mercy of our doing the Lick Mill development, or the Lick Mill Road extension, and we currently have leases and buildings there that the Lick Mill Road goes right through. So we've been in conversation with your staff about looking at some other mitigation measures or transitional measures that could be implemented as we move forward so that the other developers are able to proceed independent of what we're doing out there. And I want to make a comment. I can't remember which council member it was that was asked about the middle block 2, but I want to just emphasize that we understand that the property owners that are out there intend to stay, and our plans recognize that and don't require anything other than what's out there to be there tomorrow. So we are also wanting to move forward, so we encourage everybody to give staff whatever direction they need so that we can get this EIR moving. Thank you.
Thank you. Kurt Vartan, then Earl Kang.
Good evening, Council. So I'd like to start off with looking at prioritizing some of the assets that you have there, like along that creek trail. I think is a great opportunity to give direction to staff and developers that you'd like to see how their building construction, residential construction could look on and embrace that creek trail asset. I also hope that you go for, as Director of Community Development talked about, the FAA limits on some of these buildings. To talk about 4- and 5-story buildings on a place like this next to a $6.5 billion development is almost nonsensical to me. This is an area where you can put massive density. You want 4,000, 5,000 residential units. Look at what Related did in New York at Hudson Yards. They have a 28-acre spot. 14 of those 28 acres, half is open space, but they have 80-story buildings. I'm not suggesting you have 80-story buildings. I don't think the FAA will allow it, but you should at least start to look at the 20, 25, 30-story buildings that are around so you can preserve that open space. And the other thing that our dear friend Fred Kent talks about is if you plan for cars, you get more cars. If you plan for people, you get more people. Seems pretty basic and pretty common sense. This is something that if you look at what they did in Barcelona, concept of creating a super block where you basically prohibit private vehicles inside the super block. It's pedestrian, electric vehicles, bikes, small autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles would go into the super block. And you actually have this grid of pedestrian-focused amenities and residential living and a community that builds there that doesn't depend on cars running around. I mean, I saw a four-lane road in there. That's not pedestrian-friendly. You know, one lane in each direction is pedestrian-friendly, half a lanes. So I hope at least you look at what a super block might look like. You have such an asset and opportunity to do something really cool here, especially leveraging all the benefits of the stadium and City Place. Thank you.
Thank you. Earl Kang, but is it for this item or another item? Okay, you're set aside. Thank you. Nicole Montoyo and Geeta Dev after that. Welcome.
Hi. Good evening, Mayor Gilmore, Vice Mayor Caserta, and City Council members. My name is Nicole Montojo, and I'm from Silicon Valley at Home, or SV at Home. And I'm here on behalf of our members to thank you and the staff for your work so far to develop this specific plan and to support the vision of denser housing in the Tasman East focus area. The units to be built here are critical not only for the city's efforts to meet its housing needs for residents and workers, but also its placemaking efforts to create vibrant neighborhoods throughout the area. The people of Santa Clara are what make the city vibrant, and we need to ensure that we can keep them here by creating enough housing generally, but also more affordable housing. And the Tasman East specific plan is an important opportunity to do so. And we strongly encourage you to establish a goal as part of the plan that 25% of the units constructed in the specific plan area be deed restricted as affordable to households earning 80% of AMI or below. And other neighboring cities have set similar goals for their specific plan areas. San Jose has done so for all of its urban villages, as has Mountain View for the North Bay Shore area very recently. And we hope to see the city of Santa Clara do so as well. We believe that this sort of affordable housing goal, along with a plan for higher density in housing in Tasman East, is necessary for the city to meet its general plan goals, especially given that the city has already exceeded its job growth assumptions, but still far below its housing growth goals. So we thank you for your leadership thus far in moving us in the right direction, not only in this discussion, but also recent conversations around the city's general plan and the affordable housing requirements. Thank you for the opportunity to provide feedback.
Thank you. Geeta, and then John Wayland after that. Good evening.
Good evening, Council. My name is Geeta Dev, and I'm here to represent the Sierra Club Loma Prieta chapter. I want to agree with a lot of things that have been said today, including what Council members have said. I wanted to make 4 points. One was that I'm not sure that it's a really good idea to try to plan to run traffic through this neighborhood. I think Lafayette and Tasman are the big corridors. I'm not sure we want to see traffic racing through here to try to get from Lick Mill to Lafayette. Saying that, I agree with the person who spoke earlier who said if you want to plan for pedestrians, you'll get pedestrians. If you plan for cars, you'll get cars. Therefore, I'm really surprised to see 4-lane roads going through this neighborhood. There are other neighborhoods in Santa Clara I've been in where 2-lane traffic makes it much more comfortable for pedestrians. I would see, except for if Lick Mill gets extended, I would like to see all the other roads as 2-lane roads with wider sidewalks, safe bike lanes. And let's make this pedestrian-oriented place rather than traffic. And let's put in place all the TDM that we've talked about with City Place. That would discourage people from owning cars, but would give them alternatives. As an example, in Berkeley, you can have an apartment building with no private parking. It's all car share. everyone belongs to car share. It's a concept. We're getting there with the whole thing with autonomous cars. We're going to get to car share very quickly, much quicker than we think. The other item is on open space. I think we need to incentivize people to do open space, incentivize taller heights, give incentives for people to go higher in order to leave more space open on the ground, and connect to a real river walk, which we know that City Place related is looking at in City Place. Let's make that river walk come all the way through. Thank you.
Thank you. John Whalen, and then Michelle Healy.
I'm John Whalen with Holland Partner Group. We own 4 acres in the focus area at 2200 Calle de Luna. And we closed escrow on that property approximately 18 months ago in the hopes of moving the process along. And first and foremost, I really would like you to encourage staff to try and target the first quarter of next year as completing this process. Secondly, I would also encourage you to, or encourage staff to allow the build-out of the Calle de Sol and the Lick Mill extension as the properties are developed, and not make those extensions milestones that have to occur before development occurs. Third, I've heard a lot of discussion about parks, and from a practical perspective, more parks, I mean, it's very obvious, means that the buildings have to go taller. And we are a builder that has great experience with high-rises. We're currently planning 2 high-rises in Oakland, so I have a little bit of an understanding of the economics. And it's a very different type of project, different economics than what a 5-story type 3 building would. So the concept of encouraging by incentivizing is something that should be studied if that's the case. But I have to say that exceeding 5 acres and achieving your densities and making these projects economically viable is a very tricky thing to happen. So I'd encourage staff to study that very carefully. Okay, and then finally, the blending of densities. I really encourage that. It will allow for greater diversity of product type as well as a faster build out. Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle Healy, and then Artie Zadani. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, council members and Mayor Gilmore. I want to thank you for acknowledging that the school district will need a new elementary school at a minimum, at least one in the north, and that's after our Ag News schools that we will be building in North San Jose. There's also a projection that we may also need up to 5 new elementary schools in the north of 101 area of our district and another middle school. So I really would love to work with staff and with the council to find those locations as soon as possible for potential elementary schools and another middle school. We are very interested in working on an urban school model with first floor kindergarten joint use multi-purpose as a community room after hours, as well as a joint use library. We're actually talking to the city of San Jose as a joint use library at Ag News. And we're very, very interested in all of that. And I also want to point out that the 90 student projection is based on 0 affordable houses and very small units. That's based on all apartments. And once affordable units go in there, our projections rise from 0.02 students per unit to 0.56 students per unit, no matter what the type of unit it is. So once we have those larger projections of how many affordable units are going to be required with this project, we will be able to increase our student projections, and they will be much higher than the 90 students. And this will be across all of the northern portion of the city, since you are going to be approving, I'm assuming, the affordable housing requirements. So thank you.
Thank you. Artie, and then Scott Lane.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, that was a great pronunciation of my name, Artie Zahadani. I'm a partner with St. Anton Communities. We're one of the landowners in the Tasmania Specific Plan area. I think we were one of the very first about 4 years or so ago, and we're a very active affordable housing, mixed income, and market rate developer in California. About 1,000 units under construction now, mostly in transit locations next to BART, next to VTA. And our plan for this site, if things go as planned, is to build affordable housing there in some capacity. And so I'd like to take this minute and 30 seconds that I have to encourage you to direct staff to come up with flexible opportunities here for transfers of affordable housing. We've been very successful throughout the Silicon Valley, taking the obligations of market rate developers in these master plans and pulling those resources together, marshaling those resources so that we can build more units at lower affordabilities with greater services on site. These are tax credit projects. And the resources, the gap funding that's necessary when you pull everybody's resources together become much more realistic. So that's number one. Number two is everybody across the dais has talked about parks and open space, and we've been involved in a number of ownership groups. It's a lot of work. Typically, it's impossible to get folks to give up their land for parkland. They see opportunity at a greater rate, higher and better use to have residential or mixed use, whatever the highest paying land use is. But I can assure you, and you're welcome to tour any of our projects, both affordable and market rate, that the types of projects we're building, especially in communities that have very detailed design standards for on-site amenities, have been very productive open space projects. For example, if you're building a type 3, 5-story apartment community and one floor is dedicated to open space, whether it's a pool, gym, in our communities we have classrooms, we have tot lots, you can have those types of prescriptive design guidelines. It's not, but setting a rough goal or a mandate of 10 acres per thousand, whatever ultimately you decide, would make it very difficult to create this housing, including the affordable, and having design guidelines would be much more voluntary. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Scott Lane, and then anyone else line up, please. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you, Mayor, City Council. Yeah, I definitely want to support this. I think this is fantastic to get this done. I lived in Melbourne, Australia, which is always one of the top 5 or 10 livable places in the entire world. What they have done is actually they do an incredible mix. They'll have anything from a 3-story building to 5 stories, deep sidewalks, all the things we should have, complete streets. They've been doing this for decades. They have 4 million people, about 40 villages. What they do in their downtown core, this could be considered downtown, is they could actually put something from 20 to 50 stories behind. I'm not saying 50 stories, but the point is you need to have the visual space here. Envision San Jose that Andrew was quite involved with, Envision 2040, quite often there were wonderful plans, but then when it came to development, all those basically fell through. So we need to make sure a lot of these things do keep going. I really want to strongly encourage, we look at reducing cars, parking in downtown parking garage in Palo Alto came to $96,000 per parking spot. We do need to look at putting restaurants and retail. Let's get people so they can park once, live, work, everything here. Some of these lots in the middle, I think, will sell eventually, but some, if we keep it there, keep it urban, keep it edgy, why not? Look at what San Francisco, why do people want to live there? Because it's not all master developed. It is funky, it is different, it is a mix of places. You know, get manufacturing out there, keep it out there. There's something called the Fringe Union in Boston that is reintroducing hands-on work to there. But the key is, how do you get people in here? How do you get them to stay, work, live here? I agree with concerns of 4-lane roads coming through here. We should be thinking something like Castro Street and Mountain View, but much higher buildings, or something more like south of AT&T Park. I would actually recommend most of these lots could go a lot higher for the buildings, because let's think of the related development. How much taller is the golf course right now? 5 to 8 stories, you could easily add 5 to 8 more, and it's going to be as tall as what's going to be at the related project. Additionally, I still think this should have and could have been a place for the International Swim Center, because it is in our entertainment district, and we do need to look at all these things in a totality. Just bear with me a second. This, I think, we keep having. I know we keep having resources to go to with CEQA outside. We need to bring that in-house. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else, please come forward. Good evening.
Good evening. Hello, my name is Ron Patrick. I'm a property owner in Tasman East. I'd like to thank the City Council for remembering that there are owners there who want to stay. Thank you.
Thank you. Come forward. Anyone else line up if you'd like to speak? Thank you. Good evening.
Hi there. As we're developing this area, we're sort of painting ourselves into a corner. And I hope as we're doing this, we're finally going to do it in a way that we're taking public input and thinking of it as a city, not just as taking care of developers, taking care of special interests, taking care of one group of people over a different group of people. That particular area is used as a throughway to get to the stadium. So you can't put it down to pedestrian only because you have to have cars going through there, unless you're finally going to open up a loop and open up Tasman so that people can get in and out of the stadium, because that's how they get there. So the reality is that. So unless you have another plan, has anybody thought about building over Tasman and putting a park on top of Tasman Road? Have we done anything creative, or are we just doing the same old things again? The developers are coming up here saying, hurry, hurry, hurry. I don't care how long they have to wait. Let's do a good plan for the city of Santa Clara. Let's stop meeting the needs of the developers and the special interests. Let's for once do what's right for the Santa Clarans. It'll be refreshing to finally do something for the citizens of Santa Clara. 90 students coming out of that? I thought that was a joke when I saw that number. Placemaking, I didn't see a single example except the word. Maybe I missed it. I was a few minutes late getting here. I hope the presentation had some, because there was not a single example in the presentation that was online. I hope there's something presented other than just the word. That doesn't make for a presentation. So I'm hoping we're finally going to embrace what we're talking about. Open space, let's have some instead of talking about it. So I hope we finally have a real plan. And we need to have an economic impact. We're taking away tax
Debbie, thank you.
generating property, and we're having things that are going to cost us money.
Thank you,
We
Debbie.
need to have that quantified. Thank you.
Anyone else? Please come forward. Anyone else would like to speak, please, if you'd line up, that would save us a little time. Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, Hazel Albato. I've been a Northside resident for over 30 years. And just to kind of follow up on Debbie's thoughts. So I've been, like I said, I've lived in Northside for over 30 years, and I really like this development just because we talk about the hybrid, right, about placemaking and how we transform into Santa Clara County 3.0. But really need to understand, aside from the people, the new people who are going to be living there, the needs that we also have. So I always come up here and ask, we need a community center. We need an intergenerational community center, recreation center. We need another library. It's overpopulated, right, in the north side. We need cafes. I don't even have a Starbucks except for Safeway. I want to be able to walk. I'm always in my car.
That's a crime, no Starbucks.
No, well, there's pizza at Rivermark, but still a far walk for me. I live 5 minutes away where I can just walk to this area. What scares me, though, is the densities, right? You guys heard about all the residents here in Santa Clara. Use those lessons learned from the Santa Clara, from the south side, that have talked about their issues and their pain points with new developments, though. Those towers scare me. It's suffocating, very suffocating, right? And I understand you have to balance it somehow. And I hope that you guys have an opportunity to really have staff look at that and understand the current residents too out there. The traffic too. Tasman, our only access to Tasman is through Calle de Luna and Calle de Sol. And we don't have the same street thoroughfares that we do here on the south side. It's not a grid. It's not a grid. So really take a look at that. I am concerned about that intersection around Tasman. I go that way all the time to access Tasman. That's my only way to get there from Lafayette. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Council, I'm just going to throw out some things that some comments, and then please, everyone, feel free to give some guidance. One, I like the idea of siting, and I don't know exactly where out there, but an urban school site of 1 or 2 acres. I think that's absolutely going to be necessary as we convert properties from industrial and office to residential. we are creating the need for something there. And I like the comments about the joint use being a school, a library, community room, something with some community open space that we can work on that. I like to look at also flexible opportunities for affordable housing and maybe putting some affordable housing goals in there, because the reality is if we don't require affordable housing, people just can't afford to live here anymore. People can't afford to work here. And so we can't have all one product out there. There has to be also a diversity of rents for that as well. I like the idea of the narrower streets, more pedestrian oriented. I was in a fairly new development today up the peninsula, and it was a beautiful new high density commercial development, but it was very vehicle oriented, and it had so many opportunities to make great places, and it just completely missed the mark, which was terrible because it was a beautiful development, but it was all about the cars. So more pedestrian friendly. Maybe that 4-lane street shrinks to 2. The timing, I would like, we allow the market to let the timing go as opposed to saying which properties have to go first. I would rather keep that open and more flexible on that. And then some incentives if you have more parkland, or if you're, offering land for a school, or we're negotiating something like that, or if you're going to be opening up to the creek trail, more incentives, maybe some density bonus or some reduced fees, or I shouldn't even say that, but something that makes it better, because it's going to be right next door to our, wonderful city place development that's going to have a lot of amenities. But if we're going to really, put a lot of people in a smaller area, there has to be some, they're not going to want to spend their lives in their apartments. They're going to want to come out into some really great public places. So that's what I'd like to see on this plan. Those are just my comments. Anyone else? Teresa?
Well, I just to read it, I think I've already said a number of things. I support the concepts that you're talking about. And like I said, I think that we are going to have to be a little more flexible on some of the densities in order to get the space to do some of the other things we want to do. And one of the things, like I said, I really like the idea of some kind of improved trail, like a river walk, whatever that, like Gita mentioned, along the Guadalupe, and then thinking how, once again, thinking in our minds, how are we going to help people easily get over to the big park that we're going to have on the other side of Lafayette. So that's kind of got to be part of the thinking too.
Through creek trails or other connections to our new 35-acre park and amenities. Anyone else? I know a lot of council members have given comments. Andrew?
If I may, the council did talk about the 5-acre sort of minimum for parklands, and definitely heard the desires to see more than 5 acres. As we go forward, we weren't necessarily anticipating being back in front of you in the near term to ask for more direction, although we'll definitely come back at some point. But should we go, is the input of the council that we should proceed with this sort of minimum of 5 acres, or plus some other amenities, or is there direction to look at a different standard?
Councilmember Mahan?
I thought I was pretty clear. I feel strongly, for one, that we should go with the maximum on the parkland, and also that we should get something in here to plan for a school. I mean, those seem to be some pretty loud and clear messages from our constituents as well.
And just for clarification, I think, the total plan area is about 45 acres. Looking at up to 10 for streets, which takes us to 35. With the number of units, the maximum, I think, would be 22 acres of parkland. So we would be down to...
I don't think we said 22. I think we were saying like 10.
Okay. Yeah. So 10 as a...
Councilmember Davis?
So as far as direction goes, I like to see you go through like an accelerated pace with the EIR, but I also want you to remember that this is, to me, like an urban village, this whole project itself. So I like to see the density with the park space, with the urban type manufacturers that are still there. And everybody, it seems like they can all live together for right now, but I still want that continued dialogue going with them, because some of these developers said they were ready to roll, some of them weren't. There was, Ron Patrick has his business out there, so I don't think he's going anywhere. But I think if we are cognizant of what's going on, I could appreciate the street grid, but right at this point, I don't think you're there yet, but it might be. And the calming measures, and just make sure that we really focus on these traffic patterns and how they're going to go. Because to me, I see this as a 45-acre urban village that's going to be walkable for a lot of these people. But I still want the connectivity of the parks that we have with the creek trails and the open space that we have. So that would be my direction. Is that what you're looking for? Is that clear? Okay.
Can you also explain what the process is next? Because one of the comments, couple of comments we had to make sure that the public's going to have an opportunity to weigh in on this project going forward through the EIR and everything else. Can you explain the opportunities we're going to have for more feedback and weighing in from the community?
Yeah, I'll ask.
Also, one
Lee
other
Butler to
thing,
talk
I
a
want to
little bit
make
about
sure
the
if we condense the streets, we'll probably gain more space as well.
Yeah, and just a point of clarification on that, the one street that's shown as 4 lanes is the Lick Mill extension, which is, also planned at that width through the
City Place
related
project.
Yeah, property to the north, so it would.
It's the other streets that we'll look at, Calle de Mundo and.
Well,
Lick
even if
Mill
you
is-
have 4 lanes on one side and 4 lanes, sometimes if you shrink them through this development and make them interesting, it doesn't become a freeway through the development. You can do some really creative, wonderful things with streets. Doesn't necessarily have to be the 4-lane,
Absolutely.
pedestrian, unfriendly areas.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And we can,
Yeah.
and if that's the will of the council, we'll study that in the AR. with the
Okay,
understanding that-
great.
That we'll see traffic impacts as a result, but that's what we want to understand, right?
Thank you.
And Lee was going to help us a
about
little
the
bit.
public,
I can
right.
speak to there's certainly a number of formal hearings that would happen with the EIR process. It's publicly circulated, we'd get comments, and there's that whole formal review process. But I think Lee can add a little bit more about what we have as part of the specific plan process.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Lee Butler. And we will have multiple opportunities for the community to participate further in the process. As Andrew mentioned, we do have the formal EIR circulation that'll occur in roughly 9 months' time, hopefully shorter than that. And then as part of that, we will be posting the draft plan online as we develop that. We'll be accepting comments continuously on that. And we'll also be holding at least one more community meeting where we invite the community to comment on. We present, here's the content of the plan as we currently have it drafted, and we would invite community comments on it at that time. And then, of course, the public hearings following that. But we welcome comments at any point during the process as well, and the community is always welcome to reach out to any of us.
I think Councilmember Davis has a question.
Just one quick question. What is that radius that you're going to go, not that 500 foot, you're going to go further distance?
That's correct. We've got a 1,000 plus foot radius, and we'll also have that information posted on the website.
We post it on the web anyway
Okay,
now,
thank-
so.
We need to do all our social media
Yes.
too, because these 500 or 1,000 feet notices don't really work anymore.
That's
Because when you have something as large as this, there's, the golf course, we're going to notify the golf course, okay.
Right.
All right.
Mayor, may I also suggest that, around October, November timeframe, maybe we should have another session like this while we're in the
Fine.
process. And whatever we learn through the traffic studies, through the EIR process, at least we can share with you what the public input has been. And it'll give us some time to change gears a little bit before we finalize the EIR. So I would recommend that we come
I
back.
agree. I think that's a great idea to be able to check in with us and make sure everything is, we're on the right track. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for participating in this. We appreciate it. We are now, I'm sorry. What? Oh, you pointed that way. All right. No, we are going to adjourn to talk about our Cultural Commission appointment. Thank you very much.